the Pollenizer team, we've also got Helen here, who'll be doing some coaching and mentoring, Alan over there, and Daniel over here. Before I get into my main deck, I'll just do a clicker check. Boom, there we go. So before I get started, a couple of reflections on that process so far. So the most important thing I've learned as a mentor in startups is it's a transaction. For it to really work, it has to be a transaction. So what that means is, and that's why I asked you the question, what do you want and what have you got to give, right? Because that's really what you've got to find when you're pursuing the startup, Sarah, that you're gonna work with. If you find a startup that can teach you a bunch, and about a whole new area or another way of working, perhaps it doesn't have to be in the content to your question. It could just be, wow, look how that team works. I want a piece of that. I want to sort of learn how they're working. Then that's a good way of doing it. But my story around my favorite mentoring experience of my whole life outside of Pollenizer was I joined a company that was working on blockchain technologies. So we all know this is a new but quite complicated technology, and what the business models are is uncertain. We don't know what that is yet. So I can learn about that by reading all the blog posts, buying some books, going to conferences, or I can just roll up my sleeves and get in the room with a startup that's trying to build a business doing that. And I did that for a year, and I learned everything I need to know about blockchain. And I like to think I really helped that team commercialize their business, because they were geeks. They were full-on engineers who had no idea at all how to grow a business. So I think I helped them a lot. So that transaction was really good. What happens if you don't have a transaction is you become annoying to the startups, because you drift in and you give some generic advice that mildly irritates them, and then you leave and you've just used up 10 minutes of their day when they could be making a business. But even more for you, you will get mentor fatigue, which is a very well-known thing, right, in this industry, because you're going to start getting the emails now from this team. And they're going to say, hey, there's an event tomorrow night, and there's pitching, and come along, and we need all the mentors to come. And if you haven't done a transaction in your own mind where you're getting something valuable out of it, you'll be gone in 6 months, right? Guarantee it, right? So look for the transaction, make sure you get something out of it, and the whole experience will be fantastic for everybody. We talked about speed, so David spoke about speed. This is also important, right? Because a lot of you guys come from big companies. These guys can't wait for you, right? So they've got things to get done. The whole point of an accelerator, why it's called that, is they have got an artificially short timeline to step change the whole business. And so if they ask you a question, they'll wait for one day and then they'll move on, right? They'll get the advice from somebody else, they'll get the connection. Or if they've been well mentored by all of us, they'll send another 25 emails until you reply, right? But they can't wait for you. If you're too busy, they'll go and get the help from somewhere else. The other thing is, just to give you a sense about what we say to the startups, is you're going to get lots of perspectives from mentors, and some of them will be quite different to what another mentor said. And this might be confusing for you. So one thing to actually watch out for in your own mentoring is watch for that signal happening, because there are some entrepreneurs who will do what you say, then do what the next person says, then do what the next person says, and they'll spend the whole accelerator program bouncing from one idea to the next, and they lose their vision. But what we say to them, so that you understand this, is listen to all the perspectives, synthesize them, and then make your own decision about the path that you're going to take, because you're the founders, it's your decision, right? And you'll start to hear recurring patterns, you'll throw it against your own instinct, and you'll know what to do next. So those are general reflections on some of the things that we've heard so far. So what is a mentor? Mentors play a key role in startups, and here's the main things that they do. They share their experience and their knowledge, but especially through stories, right? Not through a rule book, right? What we don't do is say, so here's how you should run your business. Let me tell you how I run my business, and this is how you should do it. What we do though, is we share stories about things that have happened to us, which is going to give people another perspective on things. So for example, enterprise sales. Startups are generally rubbish at enterprise sales, because they've been reading TechCrunch, and what they think happens is you put a form on the web page, customers come along by magic, they fill in the form, they give you $30 a month, and boom, off you go. And they learn through programs like Muru-D, no, enterprise sales is entirely different, right? and it's a longer sales cycle, and there's more money involved, and there's different things in play, different motivations from your buyer. You guys know this stuff, right? And so stories about, and stories about how you've actually bought things. How you guys have bought big licenses, right? You bought whole companies. Like these sorts of insights, what were you thinking when you were doing that? Just sharing that. You don't even have to say at the end of the sentence, so what you should do is this. Just tell the story. It's amazingly valuable, right? Give people that perspective. Provide a sounding board. Just let the founder talk. This is also very important, and let them feel like they're talking to somebody who's being receptive. The networking and introductions is so, so valuable. You could literally make or break a startup, or make or not make a startup with one intro that you can make, and you guys have got great address books that can help them. And generally just unblocking them. All startups, all founders hit these points where they're stuck and they don't really know what to do. They're in the trough of disillusionment where they realize their business model that they thought was fantastic is actually rubbish and no one wants it. So what do we do now? We've still got 8 weeks of the accelerator program to go through. We need to help them. We need to ask them some questions which get them thinking down a new path. Some things around a mentor manifesto. So some big ideas. None of it's rocket science really, but these things are important. You're here to share your experience, but also you're here to learn. And a lot of you spoke about that, which is really great. You will learn a lot. My blockchain example, I learned everything I need to know about blockchain in that experience. So make sure you're learning, and it's all in that transaction. You'll learn a bunch. It's all about communication. So be honest, be direct, be clear. If you've done something in your past which has not worked, and you can just see them doing it, it's okay to give the brutal truth. Not in the sense of you shouldn't do that, because their world might be different. But don't hide a horrible reality from the founders. It's important that they know some things. Stay supportive and imagine a world of possibilities. So this is really important. Remember, most days for someone in the Muru-D accelerator are hard. Most days suck. Most days is the insight that no one wants your product as much as you thought they did when you went into it. And so it's disappointing. And especially when we're giving them all this brutal, feedback on their startup. But at the end of the conversation has to be, but look at what's possible, right? We've got to give them that hope, because that's what they need. Another thing that's very important, if you don't know the answer to a question, it's fine to say that I've got no idea, that's not my area, right? Because there's a lot of examples of mentors who will feel like, gosh, I'm a mentor. I need to know. I should know the answer to anything anyone asks me, and then they talk garbage for 10 minutes and again waste someone's afternoon. You kind of lose a lot of credibility as a mentor in that moment, because they can tell you don't know what you're talking about, right? So just say, I have no idea, but let's figure out. I think John over there knows. Actually, let's get him over. So that's another thing. Actually, just become aware of the whole network of mentors. How many mentors are there now in Muru-D? Audrey, how many? Must be a biggish community now.
It's about 100, or all up with Singapore, probably more around 150.
Yeah, so a lot of people. So and they're a good community for you guys as well. So in terms of the transaction and people you can meet and building the community, this is a good group of people. But also figure out who you can send the startups to when they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. I mentioned this, but this is the balancing act between brutal truth and hope. So every conversation you have, if it's perfect, it's got both. Right, so you've just said, look, here's the reality about this. So again, enterprise sales, if someone thinks they can put the web form up and magic happens, tell them, all I know is I've never seen it happen. But let's have a crack at it if you think you can have a go. Take them through a journey of building evidence in their business model. So it all begins with an opinion. Your opinion, their opinion, what they think might happen. But let's move them to a point of evidence. So a whole series of questions and so on that you can give them is, so how are you going to test that? What evidence do you have already that's true? What can we do to actually make that true if it isn't true yet, even though you've measured it? So those sorts of questions. So they're really good questions that drive actionable next steps from the startups. We had that question about, have you ever had mentors who think they're the CEO of the company? This does happen quite a lot, usually accidentally, to be fair. Most people don't want to be the CEO of the company, but they're used to being the CEO of their other company. But you're the navigator and not the driver. So you're helping them sort of find which way to go, but you're not actually holding on to the steering wheel. And always remember that. You're not their advisor, you're not their leader, you're not their CEO. You're just an interesting, smart, experienced person who's had some really relevant experiences that might help them. So we're going to look at, so they're the sort of general manifesto points. Any questions on those before we move into the next section? All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to force you to be chatting with each other in a minute. So we're going to introduce two tools that some of you will know and some of you don't know. The first tool that I'm going to talk about is the Massive. And this is a really good tool to get the right kind of conversation going with the startups that you're mentoring. And the second tool some of you will know more likely, which is the Lean Canvas, but I'll walk you through how that works. So one of the, again, you've got these in your workbooks, yeah. So we'll actually be working on some of these things so that you can understand it and you can imagine going through the process with the startups. So where the Massive came from as an idea is, especially through the whole lean startup way of working, we've become very, very good at building business models that we can test and learn today. The problem with that is we end up growing tiny little businesses that's all we can see, this tiny little business at the start. And this isn't part of the DNA of great startups, right? Great startups have got a massive vision. They've got this thing that pulls them through to the top. They're actually, they are an entrepreneur, they are a founder because they want to have impact, they want to change the world somehow materially. If they didn't want that, they would just go and get a job, right? It's easier. And someone just pays you to do the job in that case. But I'm here to change the world. And if we get the startups thinking in that way, they're better founders, right? So the Massive is like, what is this big thing? And let's just get this out of the system. So it's a great question. You can get into the mind of the founder and get them to understand what's the North Star that you never forget. As Peter Thiel calls it, what is the valuable company that nobody else is building? Right? And this just needs to be massive. And your question is it, whatever they tell you is that big enough? Can you be bigger? Can you imagine that bigger? What else could you do with that? And I'll give you some examples in a second. But then we need at the same time this smaller business that we can validate today, right? Because unless we can show evidence to investors, customers, people that might join our team, we can't get the materials that we need to take that business up. So somehow we need to know what this massive thing is, and then we need to think of a much, much smaller version of it that we can use. So think about where Facebook started as a simple example. This is not a business. If I brought this to Telstra Ventures today, I wouldn't get money for this business. I'm pretty sure about that, right? Because this is a small business. It's the customers, university students. The problem is I don't know the name of the person in my class. And the solution is a photo, and it's a photo with some information about all the different people so that you can look them up, right? This is not a huge, massive business, but what it is a business that you can immediately make and watch what people do with it and then optimize and tweak and learn and start building and ultimately become the core of what is Facebook today. So Facebook, of course, has become very, very big, but it's come from the same. If the Massive was socially connecting everybody in the whole world, but let's start off with this university that I go to, right, and get that right first. So it's actually the two things. So Mark Zuckerberg is a very, very good founder because he knows how to do that journey. He knows how to have a big dream and then increment his way backwards to something that he can do today. So we're looking for founders with this Massive. Think about this. This is the SpaceX business plan. So it's not that we give this to founders all the time to say, can you make this business? So here's your business. You're going to put 1 million people on Mars. Okay, so what do we need to do to get there? This is an audacious goal, but we break it back, down into all these chunks. until we get to where we are today, which is we've just got to get something up into space, and that's all we're trying to do. But some other examples that are a bit more close to home. You could look at Tesla in this way. What if you could sell SIM cards for no? But what if the planet was solar powered? And in fact, with the team today, I was going through the launch of the Powerwall, showing how Elon Musk launched it. And he says is the opening of the Powerwall is, I'm here today to change how energy flows across the Earth. That's what he said. It's amazing. He didn't say, I'm here to launch a battery. He didn't say, he didn't say, I'm here about solar power and we can deliver more kilowatt hours than anybody else, right? He said, we are going to change how energy flows across the Earth, right? And that, so what if the whole planet was solar powered? And this is a big part of the massive as we do it. You say, what if at the beginning of everything, right? So what if that was possible? And then we move back to where we are, where they began. So the first point is we've just got to get the batteries working, right? But we don't want to have to learn to do all the other stuff. So the first version is, what if we could make a Lotus powered, Lotus battery powered? That's the first version. That's their MVP, as we call it in startups, a minimum viable product. And then, having nailed that, now what if we build the rest of the car around it and get that right? And it's probably got to be an expensive car because we know the batteries are going to be expensive. So there is no cheap consumer level car that we're going to make. And the next version is, what if we build a massive factory that brought these prices down a lot? And what if we can use the same batteries to go into homes and so on and so on? So it's quite simplistic. But as a founder, you could sort of see, here's a journey I'm going to go on. And actually, basically, it's doable that I could get to my changing how energy flows across the Earth. So Uber, V1, what if we could exploit unused limo capacity in San Francisco? So this is an uninvestable business. It's not interesting. It's small. It's tiny, but it's measurable, and it's measuring the unique value proposition of what Uber is and is becoming. Right. So the next one is, what if we could exploit limo capacity globally? Then what if we could do the same for taxis and private cars, etc. And then what if we could move anything anywhere in the world with just one click? And we can see this whole dynamic happening with Uber, but you can see them sort of stepping towards that along this journey. So just asking founders what their massive is, you'll find whenever they do it and whenever it changes, it cascades back to what they're doing today, and it just gives them a really strong sense of clarity about what they're doing, which also excites them tremendously. And this is what we want. We give them the hope that they want. Here's one of our companies at Pollenizer, which is LawPath, right? Our goal is to automate 50% of the world's legal services. So we want people to go to a machine instead of a law firm for 50% of all their work. And we reckon we can do that. But the journey through that is starting off with just legal documents and putting them in the cloud, up to connecting those documents to other cloud services like Xero and so on, so that they're automatically completed. And then adding the artificial intelligence piece that actually generates your legal protection on the fly as it learns what you're doing in the world. So again, that's our journey towards the massive. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to step through this process. This is always the first process. We always do this first now over a lean canvas or anything like that because we want to understand what our mission is, right? So what I would like you to do is to work in pairs and try and create a massive for one of the Muru-D startups. And we've put the Muru-D startups in the front so you can have a read through and choose the ones. They probably do not articulate themselves as a massive yet. I want you to imagine it much bigger. I want you to be preposterously massive, audaciously large, right? So think of something that's really, really big that these businesses could turn into, and just write it into this box here. And spend about 10 minutes doing that, and we'll help you, and then we will move on to the next level. Yeah. Thank you.
And feel free to ask me questions about any of these startups, because I see them every day.
And keep drinking beer and wine and so on.
Okay.
Sorry.
if there's